Mehta's adaptation of Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children. Then suddenly in 2014, he put aside an acting career so he could take the post as the Toronto Film Commissioner. But what exactly does the Toronto Film Commissioner do? And how does that weave into the Toronto's film scene? Well, I want to know also if he misses ever being the star of his own show. We'll find out in just a few moments when we meet Zaib Shaikh. I'm Thom Ernst, and this is Making Movies the Canadian way. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure to meet you. Welcome our guest, Zaib Shaikh. Actually, I can't tell you how long it's been that I've wanted to chat with you. Now that you've our film commissioner, you're all over the place. Your schedule's pretty busy.
Yeah, they keep you busy at City Hall.
You're more like I would say, is your job like an ambassador more? Than
it is, yeah. It's about an ambassador in Toronto as well as outside of Toronto. I think to let an ambassador to let folks in the city know how the city works with the film and entertainment industries, music, media, live events, and then let the world know that Toronto is A, open for business, but B, also is really good at this business, that we have some of the best people in Toronto that you'll find around the world that are in the entertainment and creative industries and in the film, music, and live event field. So it's a little bit of both.
You've been hearing this a lot, that some of the best crews, in fact, are in Toronto, are actually in Canada, and also Toronto, Vancouver. There's a big one as well. And what is that? I mean, do you have an answer for that?
Well, I think we're a city and a country of folks that are really interested in the craft of filmmaking, and we also know as Canadians that you can't rest your laurels on just picking one aspect of the industry. We have to work potentially in so many ways. So you get people who are really able to work, whether they're behind the scenes or in front of them, they're able to really be expert at that, and they've worked long years in them, and they've had a great community of folks that know how to do that as well. So I think we've got that reputation of being really good and hard workers.
Well, I think you know what you're talking about, because if anybody thinks, my goodness, this man looks familiar, you might remember a little mosque on the Prairie, of which you played the imam on that show, and a very successful show. 80 countries, I understand?
Yeah, broke records when it premiered in Canada, and went around the world, was inducted into the Paley Center. A lot of amazing things, happened to all the people on the show, the creator, and happened for the network, for television, but also for diversity, I think, in front of and behind the scenes, which was, I think, now more than ever, in fact, we're talking about, and thankfully we're aware of, but Little Mosque was really that first wave on the small screen, at least in North America, that showed that people of diverse looks or cultures could actually still be entertaining, and you'd still want to tune in, week out.
Well, it was interesting too, because you kind of taken an American icon. Maybe not you personally, but the makers of the film. I mean, you hear Little Mosque on the Prairie, go, wait a minute. That's the Little House on the Prairie. Don't be tampering with that. I mean, there've got to be some people who went, I don't want to see this made.
Well, there were probably lots of reasons for people who may have been, reticent to have this kind of show on the airwaves. People who were worried about what it looks to have Muslims portrayed, and are they really funny? Because there's so many horrible things that you see in the news about that, and so do we really want to, quote unquote, normalize? Well, in fact, I think what is proven that diverse folks of any culture are normal already. And in any culture, you're going to have people that make news for the wrong reasons and people that make news for the right reasons, or people just trying to live their lives. And I think this was a show that showed that Muslims can be stupid, funny, smart, normal, they'd order coffee. They're not always all wearing clothes that cover them, right? And I think that was an important thing. And even if they were, they could again be smart, stupid, funny, normal. And that was, I think, the part of the show's appeal, and also the reason that it did kind of break the records that it did when it first aired.
Yeah, were you surprised by this?
For sure. I think you're surprised as a Canadian actor whenever something you hear breaking records, because when you get into the business from a Canadian angle, you really just, I think, do it because you love it. And because you are into the craft of it, as opposed to what could it do for my career, and how famous or infamous or how popular will something be. Because as Canadians, A, we're told that it's not good to think about those kinds of things, and B, we also have this amazing behemoth of a machine and a country just to the south of us that is putting things out to the world. And so we feel very, very small, even though we're rather large in comparison, but we feel very small because we have a tenth of the population, and therefore one might assume tenth of the industry. And yet, when you think about the film and entertainment industry in Canada and Toronto, it's actually a big contributor to the economy and to the media landscape. A lot of the artists, again, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, are known not only in the States and in Canada, but around the world as being super heavy hitters and really amazing at their craft.
Yeah, and there have been other shows like Second City, Corner Gas. I mean, there is, but when we think of it, we could say, oh, there's plenty of Canadian shows that make it big, but really, it's a quarter of what gets produced in the States.
Absolutely, and then there's a lot of shows that are well known across the country but don't get a lot of global recognition. And I think with something like Little Mosque, we were really fortunate to get, we were one of the #1 downloaded story on BBC.org. We were in the New York Times. We were on CNN, and then we broke the records for viewership in Canada, and that all happened for a half-hour comedy show.
What does that do to you?
Thing.
I mean, what does you?
Well, it changes your life, really. I mean, I don't think as much as I think you and the audience here would want to see this kind of a show and talk to me, maybe just because, what's this person do, and is he nice, and what else can we learn from him? I think Little Mosque is the reason, frankly, that I go to all the places that I go to.
Right.
And even though I had I think what one might and what some of my friends and colleagues would consider a successful career, I don't think you could say it was at all an ounce of what success came for me because of Little Mosque. And I think for diversity itself, in front of the camera, Little Mosque really changed the landscape and is known, it's even taught in schools, in universities. The idea of this kind of diverse show created by a person, a woman of diversity, a religion or culture that tends to be, you see more on the news than on a half-hour sitcom on a weekly basis. Those were all reasons that I think at least turn it into a human interest story. And then when people saw the show, it was actually kind of a charming throwback to sort of an innocent comedy, and then we got all that popularity because of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great sitcom. There was characters you could come back to. My concern, or not my concern, but what always interests me about movies of this, or TV shows of this type, and even movies, is when you're dealing with racial issues and diversity and things like that. A lot of times there's a character who will be outlandishly racist, sometimes to comedic effect.
Right.
And I often wonder when I watch shows, are we not finding a way around to telling these jokes we're not supposed to tell?
Possibly, I guess. I mean, but there are people who are super racist, and they are just, and it is kind of hilarious at some point. It's dangerous, but it can be quite funny because it's so outlandish, some of their behavior or some of their thoughts. And I think, like the rest of the characters on Little Mosque, we wanted to make sure that everyone was seen for their ridiculousness. We had characters that were super right-wing Muslim characters, one in particular, and we wanted to make sure that that was also seen as hilarious, just as someone who might be right-wing who doesn't happen to be Muslim can be seen, right? And we've got a political campaign down south right now.
Yes, exactly.
Where I think we're seeing some super outlandish and funny behavior. Is it dangerous? Yeah, the prospects are very dangerous. But when you're watching it on a day in, day out level, it can be quite funny, and let's hope that that's what it stays at.
Let's hope it
and
stays
I think
a
that's
joke,
what comedy allows us to do. It allows us to laugh in the face of some real heavy, dangerous topics, and that's the beauty of comedy, that we get that relief.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, we make assumptions, or some of us do, maybe it's just me, about Western Canada and their attitudes. And this was filmed in Western Canada.
Yeah.
I mean, how that setting, clearly, in keeping with the story, there's a good reason to set it in Western Canada. What was the reality of setting it in Western Canada?
A really great one. We had an amazing cast and crew. We shot in Saskatchewan. You know, all those outdoor shots of that prairie sky, our Saskatchewan sky, and fields. And the town of Mercy was actually the town of Indian Head in Saskatchewan. And they sort of generously donated their city's name. Gave it up for while we were there, and our town of Mercy was born. And it was an amazing. The idea of my character was also that he was kind of this big city person that thought, oh, how hard could it be? I can easily lead a con. It's a small town, and even that is its own prejudice. A big city prejudice towards what a townsperson might think. You know, I'll be able to deal with this quite easily. How hard could it be? Well, it was actually quite hard, because it's just as complicated. A community is just as complicated, just as sophisticated in their own right as any big city would be. And I think that was part of the comedy of the show as well, to see that this character who thought he knew it all actually knew very little when it came to the real in and out and daily workings of the town of Mercy.
Right, so it's sort of like the Muslim version of Green Acres in this case.
Yeah, in a way it really was.
Now, when we talk about Canadian film, television, and we talk about diversity, but Canadian cinema doesn't necessarily have to be Canadian in the traditional sense of being going down the road or in Canada.
Great movie, though.
Yeah, absolutely. But we can, Albert Chin's film that's shot, I think, in Vietnam or China. I mean, that's a Canadian film. So our borders are really sort of expanding.
Yeah, I had the good fortune of being in Midnight's Children, directed by Deepa Mehta, written by Salman Rushdie.
We were the promises of independence. And like all promises, made to be broken.
And that is a Canadian film, but it is not a Canadian topic. But what's beautiful about it, A, is that you've got Deepa, who is a Canadian director, a Torontonian, who's taking on a global landscape and a Canadian audience that really understands that, because so much of what we're talking about is an immigrant experience, and is a specific, in that film at least, is the Indian experience. And we've got a lot of South Asian citizens in Toronto and in Canada who are really connected to that. And therefore that's Canadian, right? Toronto especially, I think, even more than Canada, is a real global city. And Canada is a real global country, and not because it's on the global map, but because so many people from around the world come to Canada. And it really, I think that's, you know, when you talk about identity, and that's a real edge in the world. Every country wants its edge and wants its cool factor. Well, I think Canada's cool factor, and a city like Toronto's cool factor, is that we are super diverse, that the world wants to be here. And movies that are made here with an international perspective are Canadian and international at the same time, and you can't get that in other countries. It's like watching the World Cup in Toronto. Right. You know, you could be in any country's neighborhood, but you'll be in Toronto, and that's such an amazing part of watching World Cup, and it's an amazing part of watching the Toronto International Film Festival, that you'll have so many countries, and this city has over 70 film festivals itself. I learn all these stats now that I'm the film commissioner and director of entertainment, but that means there's a world of activity in one contained area, and that's cool.
Yeah, how many did you say? 70?
Over 70.
Over 70.
Festivals, yeah.
And it covers like a spectrum from even, like, I think there's disability.
Yeah, absolutely. There's children's film festivals, there's accessibility film festivals, there's Jewish film festival, there's a Palestinian film festival. You wouldn't necessarily get a lot of places where you could have